Actually, Joe.
Where's that guy?
Is the president of the microwave theory and technology.
Theories and Techniques.
Theories and Techniques Society, which is one of the many IEEE societies. Yes. Go ahead and tell us about your background.
Okay, so I've been an RF engineer for 30 years. I work for the Boeing company, and here I work for California. And currently I'm serving as the president of the IoT Society. Our society is involved in all things related to microwave transmission devices, things like that send signals through the air one place to the other. So, we have 2,000 members, 185 chapters around the world. We are the guys that get us on.
Thank you. And I think you're going to give the first talk here.
I am.
Because you're over there. That's fair enough.
All right. I'm not pulling rank. This is just the way it goes. No, I need to do better than that. Here's a spare mic. I need to light up at least 3 of them on this. And then turn this thing on. Bingo. Okay. Introductions, you heard those. I'm thinking and writing about Internet of Things applied to humanitarian technology as distinct from the things I will start off with, which are what I would think of as first world problems. So, I want to talk a little bit about what is the Internet of Things. I want to talk about what are the existing first world apps, what are the end user requirements there, what are the humanitarian applications indexed to the 8 subject matters of this conference, and a little bit about how to do it and calls to action. In general, the Internet of Things is plentiful and simple devices that run applications where the machines are talking to each other. They're not talking to us. Because I want to distinguish that from the Internet of People, which are using web browsers and mobile phones with web browsers and email and all those things. That's Internet of People. This is Internet of Things. This is at the top of the hype curve. If you read today's press, people are predicting trillions of dollars. Tens of billions of devices. They're thinking, 10, 20, 30 devices per person times 7 or 8 billion people on the planet, right? One of the reasons we invented IPv6 compared to IPv4 is we have so many more addresses because we thought we might need them. Lots of money will be spent on development and marketing, and my personal opinion is a lot of that will be wasted. I don't know if anyone is a shareholder of Berkshire Hathaway like I am, but there were a few years back where Warren Buffett was writing that if he could go in a time machine, he would go back to 1903 to North Carolina and shoot down the Wright brothers because investors had lost billions of dollars on aircraft manufacturers and airlines. However, at that time in history, the development of powered flight was going to happen. There were a lot of people working on it. It was going to happen somewhere, somehow, some way. It was inevitable that people were going to do this because they were developing power sources with enough energy to get an aircraft aloft. So it was going to happen. And right now, the industry is full of companies that make little electronic communicating gadgets, and they're all trying to invent these things. Right now, there are at least 160 different companies and consortia, each of whom think that they're going to tell us how the Internet of Things is going to work. They're not all correct. I predict Darwinian evolution in this space. And again, as I say, lots of money being spent. How many of you have heard of the Gartner hype curve? A few of you. Basically, this is something that's in the has peaked in the hype curve. Sometime after it, it's going to fall into the trough of disappointment, where a lot of things are shipped and they don't actually do anything useful, or they don't work, or they're not trustworthy, which is followed eventually by the plateau of productivity, where something finally works and is trustworthy, and somebody will make money eventually, but it isn't necessarily the first, second, or third companies in this space. So, this is an eye chart, I'm sure, but if you were to study the application of the Internet of Things to wearables, you'd get this huge collection of possible applications. And they include, well, fashion. I've got a slide on that. Communications, lifestyle, sports and fitness, health, wellness, medical, safety and security. Something that says, where'd my kid run off to? Something that tells you the location and range of your daughter who just ran away. That's a safety issue. Since we're having a panel, I don't want to suck up all the time on just this alone, but it's a big space. This is a friend of mine demonstrating applications for fashion. She works on little programmable devices that talk to each other and communicate with each other and turn each other on and off and do patterns for making yourself more interesting. So that's her. Here are some things that I carry around. I have worn, heart rate monitors that talk to something that tells me what it is. When I was recovering from heart surgery a few years back, I used to wear that all the time when I was bicycling or walking to make sure that I didn't push my heart too hard as I did rehab. And Fitbit is this little thing on my hip that tells me how much I haven't exercised in a given day. So, applications in smart houses. People have been talking about smart houses for decades. I remember in 1958 going to the Monsanto House of Plastic in Disneyland, where they were talking about what they might do. Why would one want to have a smart house? What are the first world applications for a smart house? Well, I might want it to be comfortable. Everybody understands thermostats by now. They want to be secure. You want to not get burgled. You want to save energy and save the money involved in not paying for the energy you don't need. Of course, the one my spouse wants is the house that takes care of itself. If it vacuums itself, even better. If it cleans its own toilets, that's a sale. Now, smart house for these IoT devices that communicate. The internet and the rest of the cloud is off to the right, and you can connect through an AP router and a firewall to some gateway that talks to all these little things that might be around your house. Now, having talked about those, what do we actually need for humanitarian applications? Well, here are the 8 subjects that are covered in this conference. We're talking about energy, health, disaster response, connectivity and communications, water and sanitation, education, agriculture, humanitarian challenges and opportunities. So let me discuss a little bit what an IoT user needs and then where these might answer some questions. The market itself, my wife is constantly asking me a question. Who needs this? Why do I want to let it in my house? Why do I want to spend the time to figure out how to use it or get it to work again when it breaks? The lady who spoke last night had similar questions, except that the economics were different. You know, she thinks that the products that will sell are ones that are either completely reliable or repairable. It's an exception that we have so many mobile phones in the third world because those are really hard to repair. Even if your eyes are much better than mine. So the first question is it a useful application? Does it answer a question that I have where the result matters to me? The second is, will it work? Will it connect? Will the whole story deliver on what it's promised? And the third is it secure? Can I trust it? Or have, by pervading my life with these little internets of things that communicate with each other, am I just opening myself up to new threats? Is Kaspersky right that the IoT equals the Internet of Threats? And that I don't want people hacking my body, my house, my car, let alone my cloud? So let's step back and walk through these things and imagine the questions that I might ask if I'm that farmer in some random country. Can I see at night? We take lighting for granted. A lot of people can't. Can I charge my mobile phone? Because we have filled the world with mobile phones. That's one thing we've done well, I think. And how can I charge them? Because they're all going to run out of power. And in the recent version I've seen of the hierarchy of needs, at the bottom of the hierarchy of needs are battery and Wi-Fi. Health. Can I keep myself and my family alive? And I'm not even addressing how do I keep from being robbed, run over by troops from another country, or bombed in Syria. Can I get enough care to stay alive? Can I get drugs? Can I get diagnosed? Can I get whatever I need to maintain the level of health that I happen to have? They were talking this morning about countries where the number of doctors per person is so small that it's not even available. In another country, it's 1. Disaster management. Can we set up and maintain communications for a disaster response team? We all read the news. We all know about disasters all over the place. If an earthquake hits the Cascadia subduction zone this afternoon, all of us are suddenly third world and will remain so for months. If we're lucky, it's only months. if you can get out of here, the airport might be closed. You might be hanging out in my guest room if we can walk there. Connectivity and communications. Can I communicate with my family, my friends, my customers? In many African countries, they use mobile phones to talk to their suppliers and their customers, where they used to have to bicycle somewhere to trade information the hard way. Can I get clean water to drink and to cook? Can I establish and maintain waste removal and disposal in an ecologically sound way? Roger is demonstrating biomimicry and building peristaltic pumps rather than the traditional rotary kind of pumps. Can I get my children access to education in any form? Can I get enough water to irrigate my farm or my garden? And can I live in drought conditions so I can get as much productivity as I can from what little water I can get? So, examples. IEEE PES, one of our technical co-sponsors, is developing standards for low voltage DC power. So an IoT application, and this is being tested in India right now, is they got 12 volt power in some house, and instead of having to pull a lot of copper from somewhere to run ordinary 210 50 hertz power, I run 12 volts around. Those are smaller wires, and I can have a completely wireless on-off switch, and I just bond it to the light. I stick it on the wall anywhere. I push the button one direction, little magnet rotates enough power to say turn on, and I push the button the other way, and a magnet rotates enough power to say turn off. I don't have to run power through the walls. I've seen this prototyped. There are, as I mentioned in the wearables part, there are many IoT devices for health and fitness applications. One that I'm familiar with is there are things that now attach and sense blood sugar non-invasively, and they can send that to something which in turn is an insulin injector. So the combination is an artificial pancreas. These exist now. We were talking, I don't want to step on him too much, but in disaster management you need communications. We can build gadgets that talk to microwave things and for collecting information and reports and questions and orders. We had a presentation a year ago from the guy from the New Zealand Red Cross who talked about his kit. And I don't see him here. But it's a kit that I want to buy. I can talk a little bit about connectivity and communications, but Tim, I think this is for you. We have democratized personal computation. They look like mobile phones. And those in turn can enable things like telemedicine. Fluid handling is mechanical, but Internet of Things devices can sense the state of the fluid and can then control the motion of the fluid. I'll leave that to Jen. And the same thing applies to agriculture. So my calls to action is we need to find ways to accumulate the technology that we're collecting in our conferences and in related conferences and related development work and put it in the hands of the boots on the ground people around the world to engage the entrepreneurial community, make products, test products, get them ready to ship, give them to the lady who was talking last night, and be prepared to try, learn, make mistakes, but don't lose the lessons and keep at it. So I think probably I should save the questions for later.
You might want to read that while we take your microphone.
I couldn't afford the pacemaker with Wi-Fi, but mine can open the garage door.
All right, I'm going to take your thing.
You do.
Tim, do you want to go next? Okay, here's the, put this on here. Would you help with get his slides there?
No,
You got a pocket, I can stick that in
I'll
there.
bring it up.
And this,
I'll bring it up.
here's the talking stick.
Okay, I'll bring it up. Okay. Yeah, just go to full screen. No, it's already.
The next is Timothy Lee, who is the president of the Microwave Theory and Technology.
I think Joe gave a really good introduction of what Internet of Things is and all the devices. But as you notice, Internet of Things, nobody's going to be wiring the devices to the cloud or to the network. predominantly it's going to be driven by wireless communication because that's so much easier, right? So my first chart here is actually a screenshot of a video that MTT site has created, and you can see this video in our booth. So the world needs more resilience. Resilience against disaster, resilience against disease, resilience against factors that affect human quality of life. Okay? And again, this is chart here I have is very similar to the one Joe mentioned, but here it's actually a cartoon, which basically in all matters of version of Maslow's diagram, where internet access is a requirement for everything. Of course, the highest self-actuation, of course, you have friendly broadband internet. So this is kind of a joke. Again, it's kind of a first world joke, but it says this is not a joke, but it is a joke because right now, if we talk about the rest of the world, it's not. It's really the question should be: is internet access luxury or is it a necessity, right? So more and more people now, within our society, within blogs, within the media, are saying that access to the internet really should be considered a human right. Now, of course, you can see two different sets of opinion here. One is by Nicholas Negroponte, who is the founder of One Laptop Per Child, and he's saying that it is essential for education because the laptop by itself is not connected. You cannot establish educational programs. But on the other hand, you got the commissioner of the FCC. He says it's ludicrous to compare internet access to basic human rights. So obviously, we're in a contentious period of time where I believe that the first position is really going to start to take hold as people realize that it's not just a first world thing, right? There are a number of websites I can point you to, including this one. It's called ahumanright.org. Here, it's a lot of good resources you can take a look at. They make the case. 4.6 billion people live without internet access. And their statement saying that we believe internet access is a human right. Okay? So more and more people and companies and organizations are saying that, hey, maybe they're right. Right? So who are we? I represent the Microwave Theory and Technique Society. So my objective, our mission as MTT is to grow the microwave community across the globe. You can see that word cloud there. These are the many technologies that we work on. LTE, 5G, Internet of Things, health, wearables. You can see some of the pictures there, including terahertz system for health and security, health monitoring that Joe mentioned, global connectivity, MIMO, multiple input, multiple output. This is the technology needed to create 5G and other types of networks. So this is us. My community of engineers work on all these different topics. So my message, as I've been carrying around as president this year of MTT is, hey, look at this diagram where we have low frequency all the way from lowered power line, Ethernet, to Bluetooth, to Wi-Fi, to 3G, 4G, and maybe even 70, 80 gigahertz. My message to the rest of the world and the rest of IEEE is that this is our community, MTT Inside. But soon I realized it's not just the microwave engineer, but all hardware engineers that leverage Maxwell's equation are really collectively with the same community. So I started working with the Antenna Propagation Society and the EMC now to send out the message saying that RF and antenna and hardware engineers, we create the physical layer, the 5-layer technology that enables wireless communication, geolocation, sensing applications for global connectivity, and of course the Internet of Things. So this is what we're about, and this is how we're going to connect the devices that Joe talked about to the cloud, where it can be analyzed, the data, and then a response given back. Now, very interesting enough, you see this funny cloud that looks like a globe. There's a whole cloud of something circling around it, and in fine print it says interplanetary network. What the heck is that? That sounds like science fiction, right? But I'm about to show you that it is not science fiction. This could become reality very quickly. So during this year, the MTT Society, together with AP and EMC, we submitted a proposal to the Future Directions Initiative to create something that we're calling it the Internet of Space, or IoT for short. Just as I mentioned before, 60% of the population does not have access to the internet. So there's an interest right now to look at the access from space. to create a network of low Earth orbit satellites that allow us to have low power handsets, like a cell phone, to talk into the network anywhere on the globe, on the land, on sea, in the desert, up in the mountains, such that we have global connectivity to anybody who needs it. So our message when we apply to the Future Direction Initiative is we want to create this technical community, which is my job as president, to empower people so that they can impact their own lives, share ideas, exchange information, and ultimately develop hope to the underserved people of the world. Think about that. With this kind of technology that's empowered by wired technology, we can do all these things. And so just to show you the fact that we're just a humanitarian project of this type is just not low tech, right? People think humanitarian, sustainable, reworking plastic stuff. I'm talking about the hardest topic that you can think of. In fact, all the topics I show on this chart, there is no answer right now. I'm challenging my community in academia, in industry, find these solutions because none of this stuff is working right now. And these are challenges that you can write solid technical papers on and to develop solutions that are affordable and can be deployed. None of these are easy problems. So now the industry is getting involved. There's in fact a brand new space race that's being created. A number of companies, which I'll mention a couple, for example, SpaceX is starting a new design center in Seattle. I think it's going to be in Redmond. And they plan to build a 4,000 broadband satellite to create this network. They've been funded by Google. Google has invested $1 billion into this project. So between Google and SpaceX, this could actually work, right? Now, they have competition. The competition is going to be OneWeb and Airbus. They want to consider a different alternative solution, which is 900 satellites. Okay, and it's hard to see, but this is the constellation that OneWeb wants to put together. And OneWeb is led by a gentleman named Greg Weiler. And so what we have a battle of billionaire giants and aerospace companies. Okay, isn't that interesting, right? So we can either be on the sideline, or we as IEEE can create this technical community where we basically are going to be the moderator of this technical community. Here I'll show you another example, the Internet.org, led by Facebook, the non-traditional player in the space, but they want to become leaders, right? And I think they can certainly become partners of our Internet of Space platform. Read these messages. These are the same messages I'm talking about, resonating with a completely different community, right? So now we can see the momentum is building, multiple parts of the society ecosystem is saying, this could be something that we can go into. Another page I grabbed from Internet.org. Look at all these companies who've joined, right? All will play a role to deliver this global connectivity to the world. IEEE has the opportunity to moderate this new technical community that MTT, EMC, our technical societies can be part of that. As I can see, I mentioned the technical societies where these companies live. MTT, EDS, Computer Society, ComSoc, Samsung, right? CES. These are our people. So we're going to engage these engineers, engage their management and so forth to help us to create this technical community. So I'm almost done. So, I mean, I bet your mind is like circling, says like, what the heck is going on? This is fantastic stuff. You know, this is a vision that I'm presenting that could be real within the next 5 to 10 years. So exactly what does it mean? It's very challenging, but IEEE has the opportunity to play a major role. But for now, let's get our heads out of our space and come back to the ground and say, what can we do now? A little bit more realistic. And that's part 2. Part 2 is, right now, MTT, along with the other hardware societies, we have already created a number of site initiatives that will demonstrate the use of wireless technology for disaster relief and to encourage our membership in Region 10 in order to demonstrate these concepts. This first example I'll show you is of a workshop that we held 2 weeks ago in Japan. The topic of the workshop was called Resilient ICT for Disaster Relief in Japan. And you can see some of these topics. Development and field trials of wireless relay using small unmanned aircraft. So these guys took a drone and basically instantaneously brought out a femtocell for a base station and provided communication in a triage situation after a tsunami earthquake. Okay? This gentleman here talked about how to create responses in terms of timelines on emergency call to restoring communication within 72 hours, what you have to do to create that kind of infrastructure so that the first responder can access information and then to send it back. Okay? So the idea here is microwave systems for the benefit of humanity. Now, I'm almost done. So right now, more immediately, you can see this more information at our booth, is that MTT is launching a major site initiative into India. We take advantage of the fact that we have 29 MTT chapters and student branches. Okay? So our people, they're on the ground, they understand their language, they understand their culture, they understand what their needs are, whereas we as from the outsiders are not going to be coming in and imposing a Western solution, right? And seeing the site already has a number of ongoing projects, working with Cartech and others, we're going to merge these two communities, the wireless community and also the rest of the site, to look at how we can come up with solutions that are listed there. Disaster relief, emergency communications, and so forth, right? So again, instead of saying advancing technology for humanity, we're going to look at advancing microwave technology for humanity. We launched this effort last year when we were in Bangalore, IMARC 2014. You can see Peter Stecker there, myself, AJ Potter from APS. We're going to now take this conference, which will happen in December in Hyderabad, and launch our major co-located site initiatives. You can see these flyers in our booth. We're going to have a site panel discussion. We're going to talk about using ham radio, amateur radio, as a form of communication for disaster relief and so forth. So we're going to activate our membership in Region 10 to advance wireless technology for humanity. Right? So this is very exciting. We're and we're getting more people involved as we continue. So with that, my last chart, the world needs more humanity. So we've created a number of contact information where you can actually contact us.
Cool, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you. You got some slides too, I think. And we need to transfer the microphone. You get that part done.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so. Right. Is it loaded or should I find it? Oh. I think that's it. Sweet. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. I also want to thank the moderators and Joe for inviting me to speak today. My name is Jennifer Fox, and most of my work with the Internet of Things has been around smart irrigation technologies and using that to reduce water consumption. But I wanted to provide a more broader scope on the societal implications of the Internet of Things and affordable technology in general. So, first of all, why do we make things? Why do we care about technology? Well, I like this English proverb the most because I feel like it sums it up fairly succinctly. Necessity is the mother of invention. Where there is need, people will look to providing solutions to that need. But, of course, with most catchphrases, there is a caveat. You need access to funding, resources, and time. The lack of access to funds, resources, and time has traditionally prevented underserved communities and developing countries from participating in the Internet of Things and in technology in general. It also has prevented a lack of access to scientific knowledge and knowledge of technology. So, fortunately, as technology has advanced, it has become much more affordable. The Internet of Things is one such example. For example, you can buy a $25 computer called the Raspberry Pi, which can control a number of hardware devices, and you can easily connect it to the Internet. There are a number of ways to share open source projects on a variety of different platforms on the web, as well as a number of websites that allow people to share information, data, and resources. So all of this has brought about technology that becomes more affordable, accessible, and shareable. This is extremely important for our society because it enables every single person, regardless of background, regardless of age, to actually participate in society and to generate their own solutions. It allows people to learn from and build on others' discoveries and to take something that was created for a specific location and adapt it to suit their own needs depending on whatever region they're in. It also fosters creativity in a variety of different areas. It allows people to identify what they have access to and how they can use it in other ways. So this improves efficiency and reduces waste. And of course, it allows local solutions to local problems, which is what we desperately need. So to give you an example of some of my work involving the Internet of Things and affordable technology to solve problems, I'll give you a brief overview of my soil moisture sensor irrigation control system. So this system was designed as part of my work with a nonprofit located in Inglewood, California, called the Social Justice Learning Institute, or SJLI for short. SJLI, as you might imagine, is a social justice program, and they implement initiatives to improve access to education and to improve access to healthy, affordable produce, as well as to create a more local economy within their community. So when I was working with them, we were heavily involved in an initiative called 100 Seeds of Change, in which we were building 100 home, school, and community gardens across Inglewood. So we were about a third of the way through when we realized that although we were able to provide these gardens for free, it was difficult for some of these sites, particularly at school gardens, to maintain the farms. And it was a lot of us to ask of the teachers to water the farm, to check on the plants every day. Teachers are already overburdened, and they were getting exasperated with the additional amount of work that we were asking of them. So in conversations with the executive director of SJLI, we decided that we wanted a way to automate the irrigation to ensure we had high crop yields, and also we wanted to reduce water consumption, which was very important in Southern California, as you might imagine. So we decided that we wanted to implement a soil moisture sensor that controlled our irrigation system for our urban farms. So I did a lot of research on the existing commercially available systems at the time and wasn't able to find anything that really suited our needs. And plus, most of those systems were upwards of $1,000, which was simply beyond the scope of our budget. So at the time, I was in a graduate research program, so I spoke with my advisor and ended up using this as my graduate research project to get my master's from UCLA. In designing this project, I wanted it to be affordable and minimalistic, so that people from all backgrounds and all ages could understand the design and operating principles and use the basic structure to build on top of it. So I kept the design simple, I kept the software program simple so that other people could adapt it to suit their own needs. So right now, the existing prototype is published on an open source design. So that allows people from all over the world that have access to the internet to see what I did and to either take that and just implement it in their own gardens or to add on to it and improve it from there. So that project actually launched me into a lot of what I'm doing now, which is providing open source project designs for things ranging from portable solar USB chargers to wearable lights to a leaf blower hovercraft, which was really fun. So mostly my goal in doing these projects and in publishing them is to encourage citizen science at every level of society for all people of all ages. I also produce science and maker or do-it-yourself videos on YouTube to provide access to information about science and technology for folks that are interested, and particularly for folks that don't know that they're interested. So to conclude, we need local solutions to problems within our communities. We need to empower individuals to enact change within their communities. And of course, we also need larger, more national actions to combat issues like climate change, but those take a lot of time, a lot of resources, and a lot of people. What we as individuals can do now is use the Internet of Things and affordable technology to solve problems in our own lives, in our own communities, and for ourselves. And this will allow us to create a more connected, equitable, and empowered society. So I challenge you, what will you build? Thank you. You want the mic back?
Yeah, I think so. Then we'll pass it around. So just some quick comments before we, I'd like to actually see if the audience has any questions or comments. First of all, that, you know, the Internet of Things, we often, thinking of sensor networks, things of that sort that might be used for gathering information. But it also, I think, especially if you talk about humanitarian applications, you know, we've got the ideas for infrastructure that can give us communication on a large scale anywhere, right? Potentially could use for, you know, disaster or humanitarian activities of various sorts. But the other side of it actually is with things that are on the ground, okay? And those ultimately are going to probably work with the things that most people have, and that's going to be consumer devices like this, which often don't have enough power. Mine right now is real low on power, so I have to keep it off. And that's got to be one of the big issues we're going to have in terms of being able to enable the Internet of Things to be used for humanitarian activities, is how do you provide power for these things? And actually in the Consumer Electronics Society, we have future directions. We've got a group that's talking about the idea of, you know, what are ways in which you can provide power for normal use of a device like this for a week's time without charging from proximity to without recharging it from proximity to a fixed power source. You know, and that's got to be a part of this too, because ultimately the stuff on the ground that people are going to have is going to be devices like this that they already have. And then we have to look at how can we then create not just these larger networks that can communicate up to the cloud, which is what he's talking about, and maybe doing that processing, but if we're going to be connecting to sensors and other things, we've got to do something that's called edge computing, you know, or where things are connected locally. And that's probably going to be using these things too, because it's the thing you're going to have. So these things are going to connect to devices and things that may help us for humanitarian activities, implementing these ideas in the Internet of Things. But the other side of it is we can also do some direct communication between these devices, for instance. But again, all this stuff is going to use power. So power's got to be a real important component of how we can use these devices to be able to use the communication technology and the smarts, local processing, local data collection, and then perhaps even feeding up into these larger networks to do other things. So just a few comments I wanted to make, that there's a lot of different disciplines, and in the IEEE field of interest of various societies, as Tim pointed out, that tie into all these ways we can work together. So I'd like to see, do any of you have any questions or comments you've got? I've got some things I wrote down for discussion, but I was curious what you folks are thinking about.
And that's what we need.
And that's what the other microphone is for, so we can record your comments. Thank you, Joe. Go ahead. No, it's a recording. It's for the recording. Yeah, leave it on. Yeah. Well, we won't hear you if you don't.
I'm Bob Gill. I just arrived from Vancouver.
Okay.
Halfway through I found out Obama was coming. Joe. And
he's not here yet. Go ahead.
Anyhow, delighted to see the Internet of Things and the thought of bringing the entire world into Internet, and I appreciate your thought of powering up these devices is a big challenge for us. But you know, I also work in the Internet security side of things, and that's you know, we do these things for the good of humanity. But there are some other people who have different ideas. You know, that could create a problem. Any thoughts on the security side of things?
On the security side of things. Yeah. You want to comment, Joe?
Yeah. I spend a lot of my time working on Internet of Things connectivity. And to try to make a long story short, we are exposing our bodies, our houses, our cars to anybody in principle. So you want to make, there is such thing as levels of technical security. We can encrypt our communications so that people can't eavesdrop on them. We can develop keys between systems so that they're trustworthy in some fashion, and so that information can have message authentication fields attached so that we can determine whether or not we trust the source of the information that we get. We can have key generation sequences that are complicated enough that even our government is willing to trust them. Having done, security can then apply to the link between a pair of devices, and security can also be enacted between applications. Suppose I have a very complicated system and I've got a cell phone somewhere talking to the internet to something that's talking across the internet to something else that comes back down to a device. People are talking about this all the time. So you can have link level security, but you should also have what they call L7 application to application security. I work with some people who do systems like AllJoin, which is a software bus and allows you to put security application to application negotiated separately from link to link. In my opinion, to have security systems that are trustworthy, you have to make the link level and the application level both mathematically strong enough so that the only remaining attack surface is to lie to somebody. All of us can get phished. All of us get tricked into revealing information to hackers. We can't make that problem go away unless we erase all of our brains. But if we make the system strong enough, that's the only remaining attack surface. Does that answer your question?
I think there's a question over here.
Is it me?
Yeah.
Yes, it is you.
So I'm actually going to disagree with you, Joe. So I think that the most compelling use cases we have heard for Internet of Things, the soil moisture sensor and the light switches in India, are actually more an intranet of things or local net of things, because there's absolutely no reason to connect them to the Internet as a whole, which is hard to see right now, the need for that. The second is that I think the security risk, the primary security risk, actually comes from in areas like home security and the personal activity monitors, not from somebody eavesdropping on your Fitbit, but from the companies that sell you these things, trying to collect all sorts of personal data so that they can make money with it. So the question here is, are we really talking about an Internet of Things, or are we talking about the technology at first until the global network comes along, being all these disconnected little networks where nevertheless there is the potential for a tremendous benefit, but really you don't have the security risk or the need to have a lot of bandwidth to actually connect it to the Internet.
So that's kind of like ad hoc networks.
Ad hoc networks.
The ad hoc networks or the edge computing. That's where it's local rather than global.
Local rather than global.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of things like that, but there also may be things where, for instance, people on the ground might be able to gather information that then could be used to map out the situation on the ground, you know, if that was collected somewhere else. So there's a need for both the local communication, but also I think the possibilities for humanitarian or disaster type situations where you can have things that could also feed into a global network as well.
Global communication, now almost by your definition, that's not Internet of Things, but that's people
Yes,
communicating with each other through the Internet.
but it does tie into, because now I can do analytics and look at data and try to look for trends and things of that sort, which then may be useful to communicate back to people on the ground and what's going on, especially people who are trying to deal with an situation or inventing things on the ground to fix things. You know, fixers on the ground, or makers on the ground who actually are trying to cobble things together, for instance.
I'm just adding to it, and great you talked about the power, because I want to reach on you pledging IEEE to move to the wave, and I want to say Internet of Things, it looks like it's just for developed countries, for Western countries. How about undeveloped countries? We don't have power or even Internet to connect. I just want to think that in your presentation, to make more involve other countries. I know you involved a lot in India, but other places, they don't have that concept. So Internet of Things is something new that will benefit a lot if we have some global, but local also, which they have some challenge of power. If
Right.
they don't have even the devices, that will be another idea to move on with the Internet of Things.
So that's a very good question. So I think we need to develop solutions that are appropriate for each situation, right? So if we talk about wireless sensor nodes, and what can we do with that? One thing that I can think of is pollution monitoring, or look at things like, for example, in China, it's a big problem, pollution. So you could actually take a look at that and energize that community to come up with their own networks of IoT devices that is appropriate for what they believe is important.
Perhaps anonymously gathering information and sharing
Correct.
it. Yes.
And
Kenya has pollution too,
China, yeah.
not to mention Mexico City.
Yeah, so pollution is a big thing, right? So things like we talking about water monitoring, I think it can help the farmers to become more productive, monitoring crops and other things. I think it's to everybody's benefit that solves a more fundamental need.
So I really appreciate that question, particularly because this has been, like I mentioned, like a big barrier to access for developing nations. And actually, recently, in the past couple of months, I've been helping a gentleman in Uganda develop a makerspace. And so he actually found me because of the soil moisture sensor that I put out online. And he bought a bunch of Raspberry Pis and is developing a local irrigation system within his community. But he did express difficulty because folks in Uganda don't have access to credit and they don't have access to advanced technologies. So there is definitely still a barrier to entry for a lot of people, but as technology gets cheaper and more available through different routes, most people, hopefully within their community, can find somewhere where they could order something from eBay. That'll help bridge those gaps.
Other questions, comments out there? There we go.
So we have been talking about Internet of Things for a few years now. And given the simplicity of deployment or the low cost and the potential that the Internet of Things has, one would expect that they would pervade us everywhere, at least in the developed countries, where resources is not a big deal. I understand that in certain countries there are barriers of entry, but at least in the developed countries, one would expect that the Internet of Things would be much more pervasive than it is now.
Well, there are people that have thermostats that are connected to the internet, and they control them through the internet, for example.
This room doesn't have one.
Let's say.
This room doesn't have one.
And Google can then see what temperature you've got in your house. But their devices. There's things that'll check for humidity and give you water. Water your plants, that kind of thing. There's there are devices around here. It's in the early phases. The other thing, and this is the thing that Joe was getting at before, is that it's hyped up to do almost everything, and we don't yet know what it's really going to be good for in a sense. In other words, what ultimately will people want to do with what's called the Internet of Things, i.e., smart things that are connected together, through wireless connections, and what is going to be the thing that people really like to do it? Maybe there's some household appliances and things of that sort, your security camera, your thermostat, things of that sort that might be useful, but what is the thing that's really going to be interesting? Is it going to be a health, fitness, right? Fitness devices, that's another essentially Internet of Thing type device. Is it going to be smart watches or things of that sort? Or is it going to be something we haven't even really thought of yet or haven't found the application for? Or a game. Or a game, yeah.
Typically in the Gartner's hype cycle, the peak of expectations is very short. But apparently for Internet of Things, it seems to be too long, prolonged.
It's too long.
The hype of, yeah. So I was wondering if there's any specific reason that we are missing.
Oh.
For
Do you guys have any comments? You mean why is it so hot?
Yeah, why is it so hard for so long?
Well, it's because it's cool, you know? Joe, do you have any comment?
No, we were telling jokes.
Oh, okay.
So, any...
Oh, we got one over here. Go ahead.
Hello. Name is Reginald, and I didn't catch all of it, but I did read up a little bit on some of the projects here. I'm really excited about Internet of Things. And the question that the gentleman over there on the far right of the room presented with regard to concerns on cybersecurity, I think were well addressed by your response, specifically because one of the aspects, or one of the human aspects of these new technologies being migrated out are the access to the technologies that we become reliant on. So today, not everybody's reliant on Fitbits, but in the future, maybe we can picture a scenario where everyone has one, much like how everyone perhaps has a key fob today, or depends on smartphones today. And because of that, I think we do need to pay more attention to the trusted computing platform. And I would even assert that we need to expand that to the actual physical platform themselves, inasmuch as much of the processing or processor technology is being appropriated by nefarious sources. So just kind of pushing this volleyball back and forth a little bit, I would say that because we as innovators of these technologies, we need to begin to build it with security in mind, and to begin to think about the threats and vulnerabilities to our way of life and the ever-rising or ever-evolving flow of, so to speak, terrorism. How do we build technologies and build them safely? I think these are real questions. And when you think about Internet of Things, you know, Kaspersky last year put out an article saying that not only do we have the advent of the Internet of Things, but we have what we could consider the Internet of Threats.
So some comments on that. One of the ways I look at this Internet of Things, or if you know, all these things that are connected that we can have association with us, is these are becoming extensions of ourselves. You can think of them as sort of digital senses that we're creating. And I think the idea of doing this and perhaps combine this virtual reality and other things to create even the more immersive sense of combining sort of a cyber world that's connected, related to things around us, in addition to what we're doing ourselves, that essentially the Internet of Things, the extension of ourselves, is sort of our social network is now also these things in addition to ourselves. Now, and I think that leads to this concept of personal collection, but anonymous sharing, right? And I think that that's got to be a key part of that we're going to be collecting stuff that's going to be useful to us, but if you are going to provide that kind of security, you need to somehow be able to share it and get value from the interaction with other people, that social interaction, but also preserve your anonymity where you wish to preserve that anonymity, that you don't give everything away. Right now, everything is given away. There's not, you know, we don't have a lot of good security on these things. But I think you need to that's kind of capabilities I think that we need to be creating.
Right, let me add to that. So I've talked about Bluetooth Low Energy a lot and security, and to echo one of your comments earlier about how some of the people who use this will be the corporations, right? So I carry a Fitbit around, and it keeps track of how active I am or I am not. There was one of my favorite cartoons that was in Dilbert a couple of years ago, and in it, in the first frame, Dilbert's boss gives him what appears to be a personal health sensor, a Fitbit. And Dilbert's like, oh, that's really nice. You care about my health. But in the third frame, the Catbert character is talking to the boss, and they're saying, that guy isn't breathing hard enough. Let's give him some more work. Now, I've been walking around CES show for a few years, and I've found people who've been for 10 years building little gadgets that fit on your shoes and keep track of how active you are. Those are used by corporations for the last 10 years to keep track of how active their employees are. And in fact, if they're lazing around, then those people get fired. For more than 10 years, they've been putting sensors on the top of trucks so they know how fast their drivers are and where those drivers are, and they can control and monitor the productivity of their drivers way more than they could 20 years ago. We should all get used to the fact that we're getting instrumented whether we like it or not. How many of you drive cars from General Motors? Not very many. The OnStar system knows where your car is all the time if it's anywhere in cell phone range. It's a nice feature that if you get locked out of your car, you can call OnStar, they can unlock it for you. OnStar can also make the car stop if someone steals it, but they know where your car is. All these people renting cars, they now have connections to the cars so they can tell if you're speeding or not and charge you. Expect someday that they're going to charge you if you drive too fast. Expect that if we have universal health insurance in the United States, eventually you're going to get a discount from your health insurance people if you consent to wear personal health monitoring things, and then they're going to start badgering you if you're not active enough. Get used to that. At least I'm concerned about it.
I definitely think that's a valid concern, particularly since there's that phrase, if you're not paying for a service, you are the service. So that is particularly true with services like Google, which are phenomenal and allow access to an incredible amount of resources, and we need that. But we also have to be aware as to how this information is being used and how it's being monetized. In terms of smartphones, there are a number of ways that our activities are tracked. Whether you agree with that or not, I think it's important that people are informed and aware of this. So as the Internet of Things comes about, it is definitely something that people need to keep in mind. What are we making public about ourselves? How can we anonymize it if we so choose to? And how can we protect ourselves from the variety of institutions around us that want to make us pay them money?
We got another one.
Since nobody answered General Motors, maybe I should ask how many drive Volkswagen. Anyhow, I'm sorry I didn't mean to drive the conversation towards security. Every good thing we do, it comes with some fringe benefits as well as other threats and whatnot. But I think just to appreciate your talks, your presentations, the theme of this conference is humanitarian technology, and I think you've done a wonderful job, and IoT is here, it's coming, like it or not, it's there, and embrace it, or you'll be left behind. And I think the theme of that is to be able to provide access, provide knowledge, or access to knowledge to every possible human being that we can. So kudos to you guys.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I had one more question I think I wanted to ask, and that is, we talked about security, hiding stuff from other people, but you're in a humanitarian situation or a disaster situation or something like that, that may not be your first concern.
You want to be found, in fact.
You might want to be found, or you may want to get some help from outside. And so I think this ties into some of the things that Tim was talking about before. Is what do you guys see as our capabilities in the future, especially with connected things, to be able to use that to get help on the ground from people who are remote but maybe experts in different areas? Can you make any comments on that?
I think with all the technology that is available today and will be available in the future, including, I talk about satellites for communication, but there are many different satellite systems, right, for imagery, for weather. So things that can help do situational awareness, right? So to find where the people that need help and for them to call out, that is a really important thing. That's exactly right. You want to be found. You want to tell, I need food to be dropped here. I need medical aid to be sent here. Don't send us, blankets because we don't need it because it's 100 degrees here. But those type of things that we generally get confused, right? I've heard these horror stories where they were dropping, winter clothing in a tropical zone because they weren't being told exactly what they need. They just thought, hey, this is standard care kit from the aid agency. So I think those type of things, we're trying to figure out how to have better communication and to make better use of it. Later, we certainly be more than happy to talk to you about what we intend to do with ham radio, which is already available technology today, and how we can use it in many developing areas.
That's true. And along that lines, ham radio and cell phones, is there any interesting combination that could happen at that to allow some, because the ham radio guys generally have a fairly sophisticated capability. They can reach out distances to other people. Can you make any comments on that?
I think that's already probably demonstrated to have some sort of bridge where you can use the those links and then either rebroadcast it into a band that's useful for the cell phone or Wi-Fi or something. I think people have demonstrated that. And ultimately, even for the satellite solution that I mentioned, not many people are going to be afford the first or maybe the second generation satellite phone. But if we can have a base station that's set up in a village that's gone down in power, and we can broadcast in space, and that now becomes a femtocell base station that anybody's cell phone can talk to. That immediately opens up standard handsets that can start talking again.
So maybe there's some way in which one could set up best practices or manuals. If this happens, here's what you could do to create a communication network. Okay. This whole thing of making, and tying that into humanitarian things. What do you think is the future of that? How do you think the Internet of Things will, how do you think that ties to the Internet of Things? What will people be doing in the future? What will making be like 10 years?
What will making be like 10 years from now? Whew, that is a heavy question. Well, I think it's really interesting to see the different platforms that people can share their projects on, and using those platforms you can adjust the software code. For example, on GitHub, you can fork someone's software and you can completely write your own on top of what they have. So it makes taking what other people have figured out and applying it to your own needs much, much easier. It also allows for communication on an unprecedented scale. So like I mentioned, I've been in communication with a gentleman who's building a makerspace in Uganda, and I've been able to provide him resources, information, and tips on how to get that going with what he has available in his own community. And that's only made possible because we both have, email. And yeah, exactly, because we can actually talk to each other. And so he can reach out to somebody, or anybody can reach out to somebody that they identify as doing the things that they want to do in their own community, and then actually talk to these people and get real advice from them. So I think that's incredibly valuable, and I think that we need to ensure that that continues.
You talked about data security and how you're the product. They collect data to you to commercialize, to monetize. But the flip side of that is, if you have access to, how do you say it, data without personal identifying information.
Anonymous information.
Anonymized data. And it's open access. You too can ask questions and do research, look for patterns.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And what's the likelihood of that happening?
Well, in my mind, that actually is, it's sort of the next stage of social networking. I've got all these things, and they're my things, and I can interact with them, but then I may want, so I can create actually models of myself, or, surrogates for myself, various other things you could do. But when I interact with the world, I don't want to give that away. I want to have some kind of way in which I could actually increase the metadata I have, the appreciation of things that my stuff is collecting, compare it with other people and get their opinion, have their feedback into it. So it's essentially an enhancement of social interactions.
But you mentioned health. Health is the big thing in this country, and as you look at the price of things increasing, healthcare is getting to 18, 20, 25% of GDP. Well, if somebody wants to say, well, what are things that impact healthcare? And if nobody has the interest of finding that out because it might cut into their profits, but somebody wants to cut their own personal health care costs, or wants to know why in their community health care is so expensive, they can actually start looking for some of those answers when some economic interests don't want to have those answers.
That's, there is a value in sharing information, but there's probably ways which you can do that where you don't give the farm away.
Exactly.
You can create value, but you're not giving everything away. Yeah, you had. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I think he was first.
So for
bringing it back to humanitarian causes. So I was in a workshop earlier this afternoon, and we were discussing refugee camps. And they discussed, in particular, a refugee camp of Syrians. So you can imagine someone collecting health data and saying, okay, I've got males of between the ages of 15 and 40, and they're from homes. If the Syrian government got that and said, that if that is viewed as a potential threat, then who knows what they might do.
Yes. Another place where you may want to have some anonymity in the information that's shared.
Yeah, and protecting that information. So even if you're not identifying individuals, you're identifying, okay, these are men of, they could be soldiers, and they're from an area that was not in alignment with the Syrian government.
Well, and part of that's going to be, I mean, there's always got the human element of what it is. Somebody intelligent has to make decisions on what's getting shared. So you don't create targets in that case, for instance.
Or even, you're even in a non-conflict area, you're collecting information. This person has HIV, and then that person, that information got out, and that person has a difficult time.
There's a lot of reasons not all of your information to get out to everybody. But there also is value for people to be able to share some things, especially if they can do it where they're not identified. Yeah.
Actually, we want the same.
You should pass. What was it?
Yeah.
We want the same. Just to have a different perspective is data security. As you said, we may find a way, but just don't want to talk about Internet of Things and privacy. When I can switch that switch, I said, I want to share my data if I have a problem to send it to my doctor. But that data, I don't want to send it to my life insurance to know that data I have a problem with my heart.
Right.
So, yeah.
And on that subject, how are we wrapping up?
Not yet. We got one guy over here. Got a question. Sorry. You're the next one.
Just quickly, I think that part of the issue, so we're kind of already doing that. There is a transfer of health metrics between hospitals, between insurance companies, and between individuals. So within that, the intermediary individuals that are doing this data transfer have to be extremely, extremely careful. And actually, if that does get out, those people that are transporting the data can be held liable. So that's also something where the government can come in and kind of protect us in that sense and make it so that there are incentives to be private with sensitive information.
Oh, I mean, the whole area of cybersecurity, right? You look at the Sony company hack, the loss of information, data breaches from Target. All these are part of a much bigger problem besides IoT. And so if we live in this digital age, we're all vulnerable. And there's something that is a reality. Right now, you're talking about cyber warfare between countries, right? Between China and U.S. I mean, and many other countries. Many aspects. It's not just a loss of privacy. This is the new world we live in. We live in a cyber world.
It's perhaps not so much a question as just an observation from doing some projects in sub-Saharan Africa and observing that our idea of personal PII, personal identifiable information, is really, it's not really a concern or a concept at this point. And so I guess if we're thinking about applications and we're thinking about translating rich world tools to the poor world, so currently less of a barrier. I'm not saying that it won't become more of a barrier in the future, and we could certainly make up some stories about why it is or is not a problem for these people. But what some of my observations have been is that there's a lot less concern about how their information about them. They're actually the opposite. They see that they're more focused on the value that it provides, and either in the healthcare space or in their how tracking their child or things like that. There's a lot of value. They're really focused on the value side of that. So it's not something I'm suggesting take advantage of from a personal side, but more it's an opportunity to explore further than you might currently in our rich world kind of perspective.
Okay, thanks. Was there another one over there? Or? Otherwise, we've got one over here, and that'll be our last one. How's that?
You? Last question.
Last call.
It was actually a comment based on what we're talking about regarding, loss of privacy and anonymity. The breaches that you spoke about with Target and Sony and a whole lot more recent ones. Here in the United States, I think one of the problems that we have not yet come to grips with is that regulation is behind in terms of the international standards. So we, here in the States, we're somewhat feeling the after effects of the internet, prostitution of the internet in terms of the internet bubble and making money off of the internet, where in Europe and European standards, not only were they first in developing standards for privacy, but that they currently lead the world in terms of developing these options to be able to turn a switch, as you were saying, say, hey, look, guess what? My confidentiality, my integrity, and my availability are all my choice. And so those are only recent innovations for our regulations here. And so I would challenge those who are developers of these technologies and solutions to include not just security, but regulation and its effect on these technologies, and how can we create laws and guidelines, regulations that would help us implement these so that it creates a safe environment for the users, the end users,
Okay.
in the end.
Thank you very much. And I think that's all the time we've got today. We actually used up all of our time. So
Yep.
Thanks, everybody. Joe's, what's next?
Dinner.
All right.
I'm not sure exactly when and where dinner is, but there's going to be dinner.
It's probably in the big room that's all set up over there.
Right.
Yes. This is the last one of the day, right? So I'll turn this guy off.